Story 1.
I can still feel the weight of that summer pressing down on me, like the humid air in those eastern Kentucky hills that never quite lets you breathe easy. It was the year after Pa died, back in '98, when I was barely out of my 20s and feeling like the world had hollowed me out. Ma couldn't handle the empty house in town, so she sent me to stay with my grandparents at their old farmhouse, tucked away on the edge of Harlan County. The place hadn't changed much since I was a kid. Peeling white paint on the clapboard siding, a tin roof that sang in the rain, and that wide front porch where we'd all sit watching fireflies dance in the dusk. But now, with Pa gone from cancer that ate him slow, everything felt off-kilter, like the ground had shifted just enough to make you stumble without knowing why. Grandpa was getting on in years, his hands gnarled from decades in the coal mines, and Grandma moved like a shadow through the house, her voice soft and distant as she hummed old hymns while shelling peas. They didn't talk much about Pa. Folks around there don't dwell on loss out loud. It's like the mountains swallow it up, bury it deep in the hollers where it festers quiet. I spent my days helping with chores, mending fences, tending the garden where tomatoes hung heavy and red, pulling weeds that seemed to grow back overnight like they had a grudge. Evenings I'd sit on that porch, the wood creaking under my rocking chair, staring out at the forest that pressed right up against the yard. It was dense, those woods, full of oak and hickory tangled with kudzu vines that choked everything in their path. Beyond the faint glow of the porch light, a single bulb dangling from a frayed cord. The darkness was absolute, the kind that makes you wonder what's staring back. Nights were the hardest. The loneliness clung to me like morning fog in the valleys, thick and unrelenting. I'd nurse a cup of cold coffee, black as the coal dust Grandpa used to cough up, listening to the crickets chirp their endless, mindless song. It was rhythmic at first, almost soothing, but after a while it turned mocking, like the world was carrying on without a care for what I'd lost. Paul and I hadn't been close in the end. Too many arguments about me leaving for the city, chasing dreams that fizzled out. His last days were rough. He'd whisper things in his delirium, regrets about choices he'd made, secrets I wished I'd never heard. I pushed those memories down, but they bubbled up in the quiet, making the isolation feel like a living thing, wrapping around my chest. One night, it must have been around the middle of July, the heat had broken just enough for a breeze to stir the leaves. I was out there later than usual, past 11, the coffee gone stale in my mug. Grandma had turned in early, her light flickering off upstairs, and Grandpa's snores rumbled through the screen door. The porch light buzzed faintly, casting a yellow pool that barely reached the grass. That's when I heard it, a soft whisper, so faint I thought it was the wind rustling through the trees. But it wasn't random. It shaped into something familiar, like a voice half remembered from a dream. It called my name, Jesse, low and drawn out, trailing off into the night. I sat up straight, the rocker stopping midway. My heart gave a little thud, but I told myself it was nothing. Neighbors were miles away down that gravel road, and no one came visiting unannounced after dark. Maybe an owl or the creek babbling funny in the distance. I strained my ears, holding my breath, and the crickets seemed to hush for a moment. Then it came again, clearer this time, from the tree line where the forest met the yard. Jesse. Not urgent, not angry, just patient. I knew he'd listen eventually. A chill prickled my skin despite the warmth, and I set the mug down on the railing, or it wouldn't have been really. I scanned the darkness, but saw only shadows shifting with the breeze. Part of me wanted to go inside, lock the door, and chalk it up to tiredness. But curiosity, or maybe that stubborn streak Paul always said I got from him, pulled me to my feet. I grabbed the old lantern from the hook by the door, the one with the glass globe cracked from years of use. Striking a match, I lit the wick, and the flame sputtered to life, throwing jittery light across the porch steps. Stepping down onto the grass, my boots sank a bit into the soft earth, damp from evening dew. It felt strange underfoot, almost yielding, like the ground was alive and breathing shallow. The whisper came once more, closer now, pulling me toward the woods. Jesse, remember. Remember what? My mind raced, flashing to Pa's bedside, his raspy voice confessing things about his youth, fights with Grandpa, a woman he'd wronged before meeting Ma, details I'd buried deep, not shared with a soul. I held the lantern high, its glow carving a narrow path through the underbrush as I crossed the yard. Branches scratched at my arms like fingers grasping for attention, thorns snagging my shirt sleeves. The air grew thicker in the trees, heavy with the scent of pine and decaying leaves, and the crickets fell silent altogether, leaving only the crunch of my steps and that persistent murmur. It wasn't just my name anymore. It wove in fragments of stories, echoes of Pa's words. The mind collapsed.
72.
To warn them. How could anything out here know that? Pa had told me in confidence, with blazzing with morphine, about the accident he'd survived, but never reported right. Guilt that haunted him till the end. My pulse hammered in my ears as I pushed deeper, the lantern's light dancing unnaturally on the trunks, making them look like twisted figures frozen in place. The ground sloped down into a small roots tipping me up.
And the whispers grew into murmurs, surrounding me like a chorus. The letters.
Hidden in the attic. Your ma never knew. Secrets I'd found after he passed. Old envelopes yellowed with age. Words that shattered what I thought I knew about my family. Sweat beaded on my forehead, mixing with the humidity, and I whispered back, "Who's there? What do you want?" The murmur stopped abrupt, like a radio switched off, and I stumbled into a clearing I didn't remember from my childhood explorations. Moonlight filtered through the canopy, pale and ghostly, illuminating an old swing hanging from a gnarled oak in the center. It was weathered, ropes frayed, the wooden seats scarred by time, and it swayed gently, back and forth, though there wasn't a breath of wind in that still air. My lantern flickered, threatening to go out, and that's when I saw it. A figure seated on the swing, shrouded in shadow, its outline human but indistinct, like a memory half-formed. I froze, breath catching in my throat. The figure didn't move at first, just sat there, the swing creaking softly with each pendulum motion. Slowly it turned its head toward me, and in the dim light I caught a glimpse of eyes, dark, reflecting back my own wide stare, filled with a fear that mirrored mine but deeper, ancient. It wasn't aggressive, it didn't lunge or speak, it just watched, and in that gaze I felt exposed, like every hidden regret, every unspoken word from my life was laid bare. Pa's face flashed in my mind, not as he was at the end, but younger, burdened.
Panic surged through me like ice water.
I turned and ran, branches whipping my face, roots snaring my boots.
The lantern swung wildly,
shadows leaping like pursuers, and behind me,
the whispers resumed,
thumping insistent, following like smoke. I burst from the trees across the yard,
up the porch steps, slamming the door
behind me and throwing the bolt.
Leaning against it, gasping, I listened, nothing but my own ragged breaths at first. Then, inside my head, the murmurs echoed, recounting more fragments.
The fight. Last words. Unforgiven. I barricaded the door with a chair, checked the windows, but the house felt no safer. Upstairs, Grandma stirred in her sleep, mumbling something indistinct, but I didn't wake her. What would I say? That the woods were talking back my family's sins? I collapsed into bed, pulling the quilt over my head like a child, but sleep was fractured, the whispers threading through my dreams, pulling at threads I'd thought sewn shut. Morning came slow, gray light filtering through the curtains. The house was quiet, Grandpa already out in the barn, Grandma humming in the kitchen. I dragged myself downstairs, coffee steaming on the stove, but my hands shook as I poured a cup. Stepping onto the porch, the air fresh with dawn, I saw them, scratches on the railing, fresh and raw, matching the welts rising on my arms from the branches. No animal marks, they were deliberate, like fingers dragged in desperation. I never went back to that clearing. Grandpa just grunted when I asked about the swing, said it was from his childhood, long forgotten. But the whispers didn't leave entirely. They come back in quiet moments, especially at night, when I'm alone with my thoughts. That forest out there, it holds on to memories that aren't its own, echoes of lives lived and lost in these hills. And sometimes it shares them, whether you're ready or not. The dread sits with me still, a quiet companion, reminding me that some secrets don't stay buried. They wait in the dark, calling your name, until you listen. The days blurred after that. I threw myself into work around the farm, chopping wood until my muscles ached, hoping exhaustion would drown out the unease. but the porch lost its comfort. I'd glance at the tree line as the sun dipped low, half expecting to see that figure standing there, watching. Grandma noticed my jumpiness, asked if I was sleeping all right, but I brushed it off with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Folks in Appalachia don't pry too deep. We all carry our ghosts. One afternoon, while clearing brush near the edge of the woods, I found an old rusted tin box half buried under a pile of leaves. Curiosity won out, and I pried it open with a stick. Inside were faded photographs, yellow letters, the same ones Paul had mentioned in his delirium. How had they ended up out here? My hands trembled as I leafed through them, words jumping out. Regrets, apologies, names I vaguely recognized from family stories. The whisper started again, soft in the back of my mind, filling in gaps I hadn't known existed. I burned them that evening in a burn barrel, flames licking high, but it didn't help. That night, back on a porch, couldn't stay away, like a moth to the light. I heard it once more. Jesse, forgive. Not just Paul's secrets now, but mine. Choices I'd made, people I'd hurt in my rush to escape these hills. The lantern sat unlit beside me. I didn't need it to feel the pull. Venturing out again wasn't planned. The moon was full, casting silver over the yard, and the whispers drew me like a current, deeper into the woods. The path familiar yet wrong, twisting in ways it shouldn't. The clearing appeared sooner this time, the swing still swaying, the figure waiting. Closer now I saw details, tattered clothes like Grandpa's old mining overalls, hands clasped in lap, skin pale as birch bark. Its eyes locked on mine, and in them I saw reflections not just of fear, but of faces. Paul, young and vital. Grandma as a girl. Even me, as a child, laughing in these same woods. I didn't run this time. Stood there, hard pounding, as the murmurs swelled, a tapestry of family history unraveling in my head. Feuds, losses, loves betrayed. The figure rose slowly, extending a hand, and for a moment I almost took it, drawn by the sorrow in those eyes. But the ground shifted under me again, that breathing earth, and terror snapped me back. I fled, whispers taunting, louder in my skull. Back home, door barred, I paced till dawn. Scratches appeared on the windowsill that morning, inside the house. Grandpa saw them, muttered about varmints, but his eyes held something unspoken, like he knew. I left soon after, back to the city, but the hills cling to you. Nights in my apartment, traffic humming outside, I still hear them. Whispers in the walls, calling my name, dredging up what I'd rather forget. That forest doesn't let go. It plants seeds in your mind, growing in the quiet. And the dread, it's a constant now, a shadow in my thoughts, whispering that one day I'll return to that swing, take that hand, and listen to the end.
Story 2.
It was late autumn in the hills of southern West Virginia, the kind of season where the leaves turn blood red before they wither and drop, leaving the trees skeletal against the gray sky. I come back to my Aunt Eleanor's place after she passed. Heart failure, the doctor said. But we all knew it was the loneliness that did her in, living out there alone since Uncle Ray died a decade back. The property was tucked away in a holler near the Kanawha River, miles from the nearest town, with nothing but winding dirt roads and thick woods pressing in on all sides. I was the only kin left who could handle sorting through her things. My cousins had scattered to the cities years ago, chasing jobs that didn't involve breaking your back in the mines or on the farms. Me? I'd stuck around the region, working odd jobs in Charleston, but coming back here felt like stepping into a life I'd tried to forget. Quiet, heavy, full of echoes. The house itself was a weathered two-story with a sagging porch, paint flaking like old skin. Inside, it smelled of mothballs and faded lavender, and Eleanor's scent clinging to the curtains in the Afghan she'd crocheted during long winters. I'd spent the day going through boxes in the attic, finding yellowed photos of family gatherings, letters tied with string, and trinkets that stirred up memories I wasn't ready for. Uncle Ray staring out from a frame, his eyes sharp and accusing, like he knew things about us all. And Eleanor had always been the keeper of secrets, whispered stories about feuds with neighbors, debts unpaid, and choices that haunted the bloodline. By evening, I was worn thin, the weight of it all settling in my bones. Maybe it was grief playing tricks, but every creak in the floorboards sounded like a sigh, every shadow in the corner like a figure half seen. I tried to distract myself with supper, canned soup heated on the old gas stove, but my mind kept wandering to the barn out back. It was a ramshackle thing, built by my great-grandpa in the 30s, with boards warped from years of rain and neglect. And Eleanor had used it for storage mostly, hay bales and rusted tools. But as kids, my cousins and I would hide there during storms, listening to the thunder roll like judgment from the hills. That night, around 10, with the moon hidden behind a blanket of clouds, I decided to check on it. There'd been talk of raccoons or possums getting in, and the last thing I needed was critters chewing through what little was left of value. I grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer, its beam strong but narrow, cutting through the blackness like a knife, and pulled on my jacket against the bite in the air. Stepping out the back door, the yard stretched dim and uneven, overgrown grass whispering against my boots. The barn loomed about 50 yards away, its silhouette darker than the night, doors slightly ajar as if inviting me in. No stars overhead, just that oppressive cloud cover, making the world feel smaller, closed in. As I crossed the yard, leaves crunching underfoot, a quiet unease settled over me. It wasn't fear, not yet. Just that prickling sense you get in these isolated spots, where the nearest neighbor is a holler away, and help feels like a distant dream. The wind died down sudden, leaving a stillness that amplified every sound. My breathing, the faint drip of water from the eaves, the distant hoot of an owl. I reached the barn, and I pushed the door open wider, the hinges groaning like an old man's complaint. The smell hit me immediate, dry hay mixed with decay, earthy and sharp, pulling me back to those childhood visits. I'd huddle in the corner during rainstorms, the patter on the tin roof drowning out the arguments from the house. But now, alone, it felt different, like the space remembered me and wasn't glad for it. I swept the flashlight around, the beam illuminating stacks of hay bales, forgotten farm equipment draped in cobwebs, and walls scarred with nail holes where tools once hung. Shadows leaped and twisted with the light. But something was off. They seemed to shift independently, sliding along the planks as if avoiding the beam. I shook my head, blaming it on tiredness, the way grief warps your senses. But then I heard it, a faint scraping, like nails dragging slow on wood, coming from the loft above. It wasn't frantic, like an animal scrambling. It was deliberate, patient, stopping and starting in a rhythm that set my teeth on edge. Raccoon, I muttered to myself, trying to sound convinced. I'd dealt with them before, bold little thieves that'd tear into anything. The ladder to the loft was propped against the far wall, its rungs worn smooth from years of use. I tested the first one with my foot, and it held, though it groaned under my weight like a warning. Climbing up, each step echoed in the empty space, my flashlight clenched in one hand, casting erratic shadows on the ceiling. The air grew colder as I ascended, unnaturally so for a mild autumn night, and my breath fogged in front of me, swirling like smoke. By the time I pulled myself onto the loft floor, boards creaking soft, a chill had seeped into my skin, raising gooseflesh under my shirt. The loft was dimmer up here, the flashlight struggling against the gloom. Hay was scattered thin, and old trunks lined the edges, their lids warped and dusty. The scraping had stopped, but the silence felt heavy, watchful. I panned the light around, and in the far corner something caught my eye, a shape, hunched and still, blending with the shadows like it belonged there. At first I thought it was a pile of old sacks or tarps, forgotten and moldering. But as I stepped closer, boots scuffing on the wood, it unfolded slowly, limbs extending with a crack like dry branches. They were too long for any animal, thin, elongated, pale in the beam, joints bending wrong. My heart stuttered, mind racing to make sense of it. Not a raccoon, not a possum. Human? But no one should be out here, especially not in this state, emaciated, crouched like they'd been waiting in the dark for God knows how long. It didn't lunge or make a sound. It just watched, its presence filling the loft with
An oppressive silence that pressed on my chest.
I could make out eyes now, glinting faint in the light, sunken, unblinking, holding a gaze that felt too knowing, like it saw right through to the regrets I'd carried since Aunt Eleanor's funeral. I'd skipped visiting her last Christmas too wrapped up in my own mess. And now here I was, sorting her life while mine felt unraveling. The figure shifted slight, a rasp of fabric or skin on wood, and I backed away, words catching in my throat. "Who's there? This ain't your place." My foot caught on a loose board, and I slipped, tumbling backward off the loft edge. The fall wasn't far, maybe 10 feet, but it knocked the wind out of me as I landed in the hay below, flashlight skittering away, its beam spinning wild across the walls. Pain bloomed in my side, ribs aching, and for a moment I lay there gasping, staring up at the loft opening. The shape was gone, vanished like it'd never been, but I felt eyes on me from every dark corner, prickling my neck, urging me to move. Scrambling up, hay sticking to my clothes, I grabbed the light and bolted for the door, not looking back. The night air hit me cool as I burst outside, but the yard felt no safer, shadows stretching long under the clouds. I rushed to the house, feet pounding the earth, and slammed the back door shut, throwing the bolt with trembling hands. Leaning against it, I listened. Nothing but my ragged breaths and the distant wind picking up again. But through the kitchen window, curtain parted just enough, I saw the barn door swing open slow on its own, creaking in the breeze that wasn't there moments ago. No figure emerged, but the implication hung heavy. Whatever was in there wasn't confined. That night, sleep evaded me. I paced the downstairs rooms, turning on every light until the house glowed like a beacon in the holler. But the brightness didn't help. It only made the shadows outside sharper, pressing against the glass. Whispers started in my mind, not audible but insistent, fragments of forgotten family secrets playing like an old reel. Aunt Eleanor's voice, faint and accusatory. "You knew about Ray's debts. Let him dig deeper. Things I'd overheard as a kid, buried deep. Uncle Ray's gambling, the land disputes that turned neighbors feral, living rough in the woods to avoid the law. Had someone, something, been hiding out in that barn, surviving on scraps, twisted by isolation? Or was that grief manifesting, the past uncoiling in the dark?" Morning brought weak sunlight filtering through the trees, but no relief. I ventured out cautious, shotgun from the closet in hand, though it felt foolish in the day. The barn door was closed, latched as I left it, no signs of disturbance inside, no footprints in the dust, no traces in the loft, just empty space and the faint scent of decay lingering. But as I sifted through more boxes that day, I found a journal in Aunt Eleanor's handwriting, pages brittle and ink faded, entries about strangers in the hills, folks gone missing after feuds, rumored to haunt the edges of properties like ghosts made flesh. One line chilled me. "Saw him again in the barn loft last night. Long shadows, watching. Ray's brother, or just my mind breaking?" Uncle Ray had a brother. Family lore never mentioned it. Disowned, maybe, lost to the woods after some betrayal. I burned the journal in the fireplace that evening, flames devouring the words, but it didn't erase the doubt. Nights after, I'd hear scraping faint through the walls, like nails testing the boards, and shadows in the house corners seemed to stretch longer, avoiding the light. I finished sorting quick, loaded the truck, and left that holler behind, the barn shrinking in the rear view. But it follows me still, that oppressive silence, those watching eyes. In my apartment back in Charleston, quiet evenings bring the whispers, secrets I can't unhear, regrets that fester. The barn stands empty now, property sold to strangers, but some shadows hold on to the past too tightly, waiting in the dark for the next kin to come sorting. And in the still hours, I wonder if that figure was real, a feral remnant of family surviving on isolation, or just the hill's way of reminding us that loneliness twists us all, leaving marks that never fade. The dread lingers, a quiet ache, making every empty room feel watched, every shadow a little too long.
Story 3.
I'd been working the late shift at the sawmill over in Crossville for about 6 months by then, the kind of job that grinds you down slow, like the blades on those logs we process day in and out. It was rural Tennessee, at its core endless stretches of pine and oak hugging the Cumberland Plateau, where the roads twist like veins through the hills, and folks keep to themselves unless there's blood or beer involved. I'd grown up in these parts, in a little hollow near Monterey, but after high school, I tried my luck in Nashville, chasing music dreams that fizzled out faster than a cheap firework. Came back broke and bitter, living in my late daddy's old trailer, on a patch of land that backed up to the state forest. No wife, no kids, just me, the truck, and the quiet that sometimes felt like a friend, sometimes like a noose. That night in early fall, the fog rolled in thick as I'd ever seen. The kind that rises from the creeks after a warm day turns cool, swallowing everything in a white haze. I'd clocked out around 11, bones aching from hauling timber, and pointed my old Ford pickup toward home. The drive was about 40 minutes on a clear night, but with the mist, it stretched eternal. Headlights barely cut through it, turning the beams into fuzzy cones that illuminated nothing but swirling gray. The radio was my companion, tuned to some AM station playing scratchy bluegrass, but even that started fading, dissolving into static that hissed like distant rain. I fiddled with the dial, but nothing came clear, just white noise, amplifying the isolation that crept in like an old friend I didn't want. Out here, you're miles from the next house, no streetlights, no passing cars, just you and the road, and whatever secrets the fog hides. The static cut out completely around midnight, the silence sudden and absolute, like the world had held its breath. My tires crunched soft on the gravel as I eased into a curve, the truck swaying gentle on its worn shocks. That's when I heard its footsteps, distinct and deliberate, crunching on the gravel behind me. Not hurried, not stumbling, just steady, matching my pace. My heart gave a little jump, but I told myself it was an echo, maybe the sound bouncing off the trees or the fog playing tricks. These roads are old, carved from pioneer trails, and they've seen their share of wanderers. Hunters lost in the dark, drunks staggering home, even tales of feral folks who'd gone off-grid after the mines closed, living wild in the woods. Daddy used to spin yarns about them around the fire, eyes serious, warning us kids not to stray too far. I glanced in the rearview mirror, expecting to see headlights or a silhouette, but there was nothing, just inky blackness pressing against the tail light's red glow. The footsteps continued, faint but insistent, like someone walking just off the shoulder, hidden in the mist. I slowed for another bend, tires biting gravel, and the steps slowed too, sinking perfect. A chill prickled my arms, despite the heater humming weak. Accelerating, I pushed the truck to 40, the engine growling, and damn if the footsteps didn't quicken. Always just behind, out of sight. My mind raced animal. Deer don't walk like that. Measured and two-legged. Person? Who'd be out here, pacing a truck in the fog? I thought of those forest legends. Folks driven mad by solitude, surviving on what the woods provided, eyes gone wild from years without human contact. The road straightened for a stretch, and the sounds persisted, closer now, like they were gaining without effort. Sweat beaded on my forehead, the cab feeling smaller, the fog outside thicker. I pulled over abrupt, tires skidding to a halt on the shoulder, gravel spraying. Killed the engine, the sudden quiet deafening, only my breathing rough in the silence. I listened intently, window cracked an inch, cool air seeping in with the scent of damp earth and pine. The footsteps stopped too, but the absence was worse heavy with anticipation, like whatever it was waited just beyond view, patient as death. Minutes ticked by, the fog swirling lazy around the truck, and nothing. No birds, no wind rustling leaves, just that oppressive hush, grabbing the tire iron from under the seat-cold metal, reassuring in my grip. I stepped out, boots hitting gravel with a crunch that echoed too loud. The cool air raised goosebumps on my skin, the mist dampening my shirt immediate. I scanned the road behind, tire iron raised, but saw only fog-shrouded trees lining the ditch, branches like skeletal arms reaching out. "Who's there?" I called, voice cracking slight, swallowed by the night. No answer, but then the footsteps resumed closer, circling the truck slow, gravel shifting under invisible weight. Left side first, then around the bed, deliberate, like sizing me up. My pulse thundered in my ears, and I swung the iron wild, whistling through air, hitting nothing but mist. A brush of cold air grazed my neck, like a breath exhaled close, carrying a faint, musty scent earth and unwashed skin, the kind that clings to someone long removed from soap and society. Panic surged, hot and sharp, as the steps paused behind me. I whirled, iron arcing, but again, empty space. The circling continued, now faster, gravel crunching in a loop that tightened. I bolted for the cab, slamming the door, fumbling the keys into the ignition. The engine roared to life, headlights piercing the fog, and I peeled out, tires spinning before catching. The footsteps faded as I sped off, but never fully gone echoing faint in my mind, or maybe through the open window. The road blurred, curves taken too fast, but I didn't care. Home was all that mattered. That trailer with its locked door and shotgun by the bed. I arrived shaking, truck skidding to a stop in the driveway, gravel flying. Bolted inside, flipping every light, checking windows, the door barred with a chair for good measure. The trailer was small kitchen, living room, bedroom all familiar, but tonight it felt exposed, the thin walls no barrier against whatever followed. I paced, tire iron still in hand, listening to the night outside. Crickets chirped sporadic, an owl hooted distant, but beneath it, a unease lingered. Sinking into bed eventually, clothes on, lights dimmed but not off, I stared at the ceiling, mind replaying the sounds. Exhaustion pulled me under fitful dreams of endless roads and pursuing shadows. Later that night or early morning. Clock reading 3, I woke to it again. Footsteps, faint at first, on the porch boards creaking soft. My eyes snapped open, body rigid under the quilt. Not wind, not settling house deliberate steps, pacing the length of the porch, gravel from the drive crunching as if tracked in. I held my breath, listening as they stopped at the door, a soft scrape like fingers testing the knob. Then, impossibly, under the floorboards muffled crunching, like walking the crawl space beneath, circling the trailer foundation. My heart hammered, skin crawling. How could anything be down there, in that tight, damp space full of pipes and dirt? I grabbed the shotgun from the knitstand, racking a shell loud, but the sounds continued undeterred, fading slow as dawn approached. Morning brought weak sunlight filtering through the pines. Fog burned off, leaving the world crisp and ordinary. I ventured out cautious, shotgun ready, but found no evidence, just my own boot prints in the dew-slick grass, leading from the truck to the door. No other marks on the porch, no disturbances under the trailer when I crawled beneath. Flashlight beam revealing only cobwebs and rust. The road looked peaceful in daylight, curves gentle, trees whispering in the breeze. But the normalcy felt false, like a mask over something older, hungrier. Days passed, and I threw myself into routine work at the mill. Beers at the local bar, where folks traded stories of strange happenings in the hills. I mentioned it once, casual, to old man Harlan behind the counter. He paused, eyes narrowing. Them roads remember, boy. Travelers gone missing. Folks say they hear steps following him home. Feral ones, maybe kin who lost their way, or something echoing the past. He shrugged, but his voice held weight, like he'd heard it before. I laughed it off, but inside, doubt-gnawed nights grew worse. I'd drive home careful, radio blasting to drown the quiet, but sometimes, in the fog, I'd hear them again, footsteps matching my tires, vanishing when I stopped. At home, the trailer felt watched. Creaks in the walls, faint crunching underfoot when I walked the floors alone. Memories surfaced unbidden daddy's tales of great Uncle Jed, who vanished in these woods after a family spat, rumored to live feral scavenging, eyes gone mad from isolation. Was it him? Or just the land's way of holding grudges, echoing regrets through the mist? I sold the trailer eventually, moved closer to town, but the dread tags along. City lights don't erase it. Quiet hours bring the sound's faint footsteps in the hallway or outside the window, patient and deliberate. Those roads out there, they remember every traveler, every wrong turn, every secret buried in the hollers. And sometimes they follow you home, echoing in the still moments when you're alone with your thoughts. The fear builds slow, realizing some paths lead to places you can't escape, and whatever walks them might just be a part of you, waiting to catch up.
Story 4.
I'd been living in that cabin deep in the backwoods of southwest Virginia for nigh on 15 years by the time that storm hit, the kind of place where the Blue Ridge Mountains fold in on themselves like an old quilt, hiding hollers and secrets that city folks wouldn't understand. It was my granddaddy's land originally, passed down after he killed over in '85 from Blacklong, courtesy of the coal mines that scarred these hills. I took it over after my divorce, needing the solitude like a balm for wounds that wouldn't heal. Sarah leaving with the kids, saying I was too distant, too swallowed by the quiet. Out here, the nearest neighbor was Old Man Whitaker, 5 miles down the rutted dirt road, and even he only showed up every few months for a jar of moonshine or to trade venison. The cabin was simple, log walls chinked with mud, a stone fireplace that heated the single room, and a loft for sleeping. No electricity most days. I ran off a generator when I needed, but storms like this one knocked it out regular, leaving me to the old ways. That winter had been harsh, snow piling up early, turning the forest into a white labyrinth where trails vanished overnight. The night the blackout hit, the wind started howling around dusk, whipping branches against the roof like fingers patting impatient. I'd batten down, stacking extra wood by the fire, knowing the power lines would snap under the ice. By 8, the generator sputtered out, plunging everything into a darkness so thick you could feel it pressing on your eyes. I lit the old oil lantern, the one Granddaddy brought back from his mining days, brass tarnished, wick trimmed careful. Its flame danced steady at first, casting a warm glow over the room, illuminating the worn armchair where I sat with a dog-eared book of local folklore, tales of lost miners and whispers in the woods that folks swore were real. I'd read them before, half believing, half scoffing. These hills held legends, sure, but I'd always chalked them up to isolation playing tricks on lonely minds. The wind rattled the windows like knocks from someone desperate to get in, shaking the panes in their frames. I'd grown accustomed to the solitude over the years, the way nights stretched long, filled with the creak of settling logs and the distant call of owls. But that evening, an unease settled in my gut, subtle at first, like a draft sneaking under the door. The flame in the lantern flickered unnaturally, not with the gusts slipping through cracks, but erratic, dimming, then flaring as if breathing. Shadows elongated on the walls, stretching like fingers reaching for something just out of grasp. I told myself it was the wick, maybe needing a trim, but as I stared, the shadows seemed to whisper, faint, indistinct, like voices muffled by distance, recounting fragments of stories I'd heard as a boy. Granddaddy's tales of men trapped in cave-ins, calling out in the dark, their echoes lingering long after rescue came too late. I shook it off, focusing on the book, the fire crackling steady in the hearth, popping sparks that danced like fireflies. The storm intensified outside, snow pelting the glass, the wind moaning through the trees like a lament. I'd lived through worse, blizzards that buried the cabin door, forcing me to dig out come morning. But tonight, the isolation felt heavier, pressing on my chest. Memories surfaced unbidden, Sarah's last words, accusing me of burying myself in these woods to avoid facing life, the kids' faces as they drove away. Regrets like that fester in the quiet, and out here, there's plenty of quiet to go around. As I turned a page, something caught my eye through the window. A second light, dim and bobbing, approaching slow through the trees. It was faint, like another lantern, weaving between the trunks at the edge of the yard. My heart gave a thud. Could be Whitaker, caught out in the storm, needing shelter. Folks in these parts look out for each other. Survival demands it. I set the book aside, the chair creaking as I rose and moved to the door. The wind howled fiercer, rattling the latch, but I cracked it open anyway, cold rushing in like an unwelcome guest, carrying the scent of pine and frozen earth. "Hello? That you, Whitaker?" I called, voice swallowed by the gale. No answer. Just the light hovering at the yard's edge, not advancing, just waiting, its glow steady amid the swirling snow. Curiosity tugged at me, overriding the caution these woods instill. I grabbed my coat from the hook, thick wool scarred from years of brambles, and lifted my lantern high. Stepping out, boots crunching on the fresh powder, the cold bit deep, numbing my fingers quick. The porch steps groaned under my weight, and I trudged toward the light, wind whipping my face, snowflakes stinging like needles. The forest loomed dark beyond the yard, trees swaying like sentinels, branches cracking occasional under the ice's weight. The bobbing glow stayed put, maybe 30 yards off, flickering soft through the flakes. "Who's out there? You hurt?" I shouted again, but only the wind replied, moaning low. As I drew closer, lantern held aloft, its flame casting jittery shadows on the snow. The light revealed no one, just an empty space where it hovered, then faded gradual into the darkness, like a candle snuffed. I stood there, breath fogging, scanning the trees, but saw nothing. No footprints, no sign of passage. A chill deeper than the cold settled in my bones. These hills have stories of lanterns leading folks astray, luring them into the woods where they vanish. But I'd always dismissed them as superstition, excuses for drumps getting lost. Shaking my head, I turned back, the wind pushing at my back like hands urging me home. Inside, I bolted the door, shedding my coat, the warmth from the fire welcoming but insufficient against the unease. The lantern's flame dimmed on the table, wick sputtering as if starved for air. I heard it then, scratching at the walls, soft but persistent, like nails dragging slow on the logs outside. Not branches, too rhythmic, too deliberate. I froze, listening as it circled the cabin, pausing at windows, testing. My skin prickled, mind racing. Animal? Coon or bear, desperate in the storm? But it felt wrong, too human in its patience. I relit the lantern, adjusting the wick, and the flame steadied, but the shadows reformed on the walls, twisting into shapes that sent a jolt through me. Figures, elongated and faint, like silhouettes from old family photos I'd kept in a trunk upstairs. Granddaddy in his mining helmet, Grandma young and stern, uncles lost to the wars or the bottle. Their forms wavered, arms outstretched in silent pleas, faces contorted not in anger but sorrow, as if begging for something unspoken. I stared, how come me, memories flooding, Granddaddy's deathbed confessions, whispers about a family curse, bad luck following us like a shadow, minds collapsing, kin disappearing into the woods after arguments never found. Had they been out there, lanterns bobbing, searching for resolution? The scratching intensified, now from inside, nails on the floorboards circling the room. I extinguished the lantern quick, plunging everything into total black, the fire's embers glowing faint. But the sounds didn't stop. They grew, scratching at the walls near me, close enough to feel the vibration. I backed to the loft ladder, climbing blind, pulling the quilt over my head like a child, listening as the night dragged on. Whispers joined the scratches, fragments of voices, echoing regrets I'd carried, not fighting harder for Sarah, not visiting Granddaddy more before he passed. The storm raged outside, but inside the dread built slow, a quiet terror that made every creak a threat. Dawn broke eventual, gray light seeping through the frosted windows, the wind dying to a murmur. The scratching had faded with the bark, leaving silence. I descended cautious, relighting the fire, surveying the room. Marks etched the wood, deep scratches on the walls and floor, like fingers had clawed desperate, forming patterns that resembled words, half-formed pleas, forgive, lost. No blood, no debris, just warnings carved into the logs, imagined tales from the folklore book. I never lit that lantern again. It sits dusty on the shelf, a relic best forgotten. The cabin feels different now, the solitude sharper, laced with awareness that some lights illuminate things better left in the dark. Echoes of the past, regrets that linger in the shadows, stirring a quiet unease that settles in your bones. Nights since, during storms, I hear scratching faint, see lights bobbing distant through the trees, and wonder if it's kin calling, or my own guilt manifesting, waiting for me to follow. The fear doesn't scream, It whispers, building slow, leaving me to question if isolation saves you or just buries you deeper with what you've left unresolved. The weeks after blurred into routine, chopping wood, hunting rabbits for stew, the snow melting slow as spring teased the hills. But the marks remained, etched permanent, and I traced them with my fingers, feeling the grooves like Braille telling a story I didn't want to read. Whitaker came by one afternoon, truck rumbling up the road, bringing salt pork and news from town. I mentioned the storm casual, the strange light, but not the shadows or scratches. Folks out here don't share everything. It invites judgment. He nodded slow, eyes distant. These woods remember Elias. My pa told of lanterns in the trees after the '42 flood, leading search parties to bodies, or nothing. Some say it's the lost ones, feral from grief, surviving on roots and regret, drawing kin out to join them. His words stuck, festering. I'd always prided myself on self-reliance, surviving alone, but now the cabin's quiet felt accusatory, every shadow a potential figure. Nights I'd sit by the fire with candles instead, their flames steady, but even they cast doubts. Memories sharpened. Grandma's stories of her brother vanished in these woods after a family feud, rumored to live wild, eyes hollow from madness. Had you scratched at doors during storms seeking forgiveness? Or was it all in my head? Isolation, twisting thoughts like vines choking a tree. One evening, as dusk fell without storm, I saw it again, a light bobbing through the trees, closer this time. I stayed inside, door barred, but the scratching started, soft, inside the walls, like something burrowed deep. I ignored it, reading by candlelight, but the whispers returned, voicing secrets I'd buried. Letters from Sarah I'd never answered, pleas from the kids to come back. The light hovered outside the window, patient, and for a moment, I almost opened the door, drawn by a sorrow that mirrored my own. I didn't. Come morning, fresh scratches on the sill, inside. I patched them with mud, but they reappear sometimes, faint lines emerging like veins under skin. The lantern gathers dust, but its pole lingers, a temptation to illuminate what's hidden. These backwoods hold on to their own, feral echoes of lives unfinished, dread that seeps slower into your days. And in the quiet hours, I wonder if I'll light it one night, follow that glow into the trees, seeking closure or just joining the lost. The unease doesn't end. It settles, a companion in the solitude, whispering that some darknesses are meant to stay unlit, lest they reveal truths that break you.
Story 5.
I'd always found solace in the Smoky Mountains, those ancient ridges in eastern Tennessee, where the air hangs heavy with mist and the trees whisper secrets older than any family Bible. It was late spring of 17 when I set out alone on that hike, needing to shake off a year that had chewed me up and spit me out. Lost my job at the lumber yard after the mill shut down. Then Mom passed sudden from a stroke, leaving me rattling around her empty house in Gatlinburg like a ghost myself. Folks said time heals, but out here, time just stretches, giving wounds room to fester. I'd grown up trailing these paths with Dad before he took off when I was 12, leaving echoes of arguments that still rang in my ears. So I parked my beat-up Chevy at the trailhead off the old logging road, slung a day pack with water and a sandwich, and headed into the woods, figuring the solitude would clear my head, not knowing it would fill it with something worse. The trail was familiar, a narrow dirt path winding through dense laurel and rhododendron, their blooms just starting to fade. Sunlight dappled the ground in patches, but as evening approached, the light turned golden, then dim, shadows lengthening like fingers reaching across the forest floor. Birds called sporadic, a cardinal's trill, a woodpecker's knocked, but the deeper I went, the quieter it got, as if the woods were holding their breath, waiting for something. I'd aim for Hollow Creek, a spot Dad used to fish, where the water ran deep and dark from tannins leaching out of the leaves, staining it black like old coffee. It was about 3 miles in, a place locals avoided after dusk, muttering about old Cherokee legends or moonshiners gone feral in the backcountry, living rough off berries and whatever they could trap. I dismissed it as tall tales. These mountains breed superstition like they do fog. My boots crunched on fallen leaves and pine needles, the rhythm steady, grounding. Sweat beaded on my back under the flannel shirt, the air thick with the scent of earth and decay. A rough year, yeah. Arguments with my sister over Mom's will. Words thrown like knives that couldn't be taken back. "You're just like Dad," she'd said, voice breaking, and it stuck, burrowing deep. I pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the trail's incline, my breath coming harder as I crested a ridge. Dusk settled soft, the sky bruising purple overhead, and the temperature dropped, a chill seeping through despite the mild day. The forest closed in, trees towering like silent watchers, their branches interlacing to blot out the fading light. No other hikers. This wasn't the tourist path to Klingman's Dome. Just me, the pack thumping against my hips, and the growing sense that the woods weren't as empty as they seemed. Reaching Hollow Creek as the last light bled from the sky, I paused on the bank, the water murmuring low, black and inscrutable under the gloom. It pooled in eddies, reflecting twisted branches like veins. I sat on a mossy log, pulling out my water bottle, listening to the babble, soothing at first, a constant that drowned the noise in my head. But as night fell proper, the quiet deepened, unnatural, like the animals had fled some unseen threat. No crickets yet, no frogs chorusing, just a creak in my own breathing. I stood to stretch, boots shifting on the pebble shore, and that's when the echo started, my footsteps delayed and distorted, coming not from behind but off to the side, from the wrong direction, as if the sound had bounced funny off the ridges. I stopped abrupt, ear straining, and the steps continued for a few more crunches, fading slow. My heart gave a little stutter, but I shook it off as an acoustic trick. The wave sounds carry strange in these hollers, amplified by the mist rising from the water. Mountains play games with your senses. Dad used to say that, laughing it off after we'd hear a distant call that sounded too human. I pressed on along the bank, figuring I'd loop back before full dark, flashlight in my pack if needed. But the echoes persisted, mirroring my pace but offset, like someone trailing just out of sight in the underbrush. The creek's babble masked them partial, but they grew clearer. Not just steps now, but murmurs, low and indistinct, weaving through the water's rush. At first, I thought it was my mind wandering, replaying old conversations, the argument with Mom before her stroke, her voice sharp. "You never visit, always running like your father." Words I'd regretted immediate, but too late to mend. But these weren't memories. They were audible, murmuring from the trees or the water, half-recognized snippets. "You're just like him, always leaving." Accusatory, edged with hurt. My skin prickled, a chill unrelated to the cooling air. I stopped again, calling out, "Hello, anyone there?" My voice echoed back normal at first, then distorted, laced with laughter soft and mocking, not mine. The forest remained still. No rustle of leaves, no snap of twigs, just that oppressive quiet broken by the voices, growing bolder, recounting fights with my ex. Her tears as she packed. "You push everyone away." Panic flickered low in my gut, but I pushed forward, rationalizing. Maybe a trick of the wind, or exhaustion after the hike. The trail narrowed, roots snaking across the path like traps, and the creek ran beside, its surface rippling unnatural, waves forming without wind or stone. I knelt to splash water on my face, hoping the cold would snap me out of it, but dipping my hand in, it felt unnaturally warm, like bath water, not the icy flow it should be this time of year. Ripples spread outward from my touch, concentric circles pulsing like signals, and the voices swelled, clearer now, a chorus of regrets. Dad's last phone call before he vanished, slurred and sorry. Sister's accusations after the funeral, blaming me for not being there. They came from the water, bubbling up like the creek was a speaker, amplifying buried pain. Something brushed my ankle then, soft and insistent, like fingers wrapping gentle, pulling with a subtle tug. Not a fish or branch, too deliberate, too human in its grasp. I yanked away hard, stumbling back up the bank, heart slamming against my ribs. The water churned slight where I'd been, bubbles rising, and the echoes followed, now laughing softly, a sound that chilled deeper than any cold. "Run like always," It seemed to say, woven into the murmurs. I scrambled to my feet, pack forgotten for a moment, and bolted back the way I'd come, branches whipping at my face and arms, leaving welts that stung like judgments past. The trail blurred in the dark, my flashlight beam jittering as I fumbled it on, casting wild shadows that danced like pursuers. The voices trailed me, fading but persistent, echoing off the ridges, recounting every harsh word I'd ever spoken. Every bridge burned. I burst from the woods onto the gravel lot, car keys shaking in my hand, diving inside and locking the doors. The engine roared to life, headlights cutting through the mist as I peeled out. Gravel sprang, safe in the cab, windows up. The voices faded to nothing, just the hum of tires on pavement carrying me home. That night, in Mom's old house, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the quiet of the rooms mocking me. No echoes, no murmurs, just silence. But it felt suspicious, like it hid something waiting to speak. Days turned to weeks, and I threw myself into job hunts, avoiding the trails, telling myself it was a hallucination, grief and stress manifesting. But in quiet moments, sitting alone in the kitchen, or lying in bed, the echoes returned, faded first, like a radio tuned low in another room. Snippets of arguments, regrets voiced in familiar tones, bubbling up from nowhere. I checked online once, reading forums about Smoky Mountain legends, tales of Hollow Creek, holding on to voices of the drowned or lost, feral wanderers mimicking calls to lure folks in, old stories of miners washed away in floods, their pleas echoing eternal, or families fractured by feuds, their words trapped in the water like recordings. One evening, needing closure, I drove back to the trailhead, but stopped short, engine idling. The woods loomed dark, mist curling like breath, and from the trees, a faint murmur carried my name, called soft, accusatory. I turned around, but the dread followed, settling in like fog in the hollers. That creek reflects more than water. It holds onto voices long silenced, dredging them up when you're vulnerable. Now, every silence feels pregnant, waiting to birth old hurts, making me question if those echoes are out there or inside me, festering. The mountains don't forget, and neither do I. The fear lingers, a quiet companion, whispering that some paths lead back to what you've tried to leave behind, pulling gentle until you can't yank away. The months blurred after that, summer heat baking the town, tourists flooding the parks with their laughter and cameras, oblivious to the undercurrents. I found work at a hardware store, stocking shelves, the routine a buffer against the unease. But hikes were off limits. Even drives through the foothills set my nerves on edge, ears straining for distortions in the wind. Friends noticed my jumpiness, asked if I was all right. But how do you explain without sounding unhinged? Heard voices in the woods, I'd say, and they'd chuckle, sharing their own spooky tales around beers, Bigfoot sightings, or ghost lights on Brown Mountain. Mine felt different, too personal, like the forest had rifled through my memories and thrown them back distorted. One night, storm rolling in from the west, thunder rumbling like distant arguments. I sat on the porch with a coffee, rain pattering the tin roof. The creek wasn't near, but the sound of water triggered it. Echoes faint in the downpour, murmuring regrets. Mom's final words, weak but sharp. Don't end up alone. I went inside, but they followed, whispering from the drains or the walls, laughing soft when I turned on the TV to drown them. Sleep came fitful, dreams of wading into black water, hands pulling me under, faces of lost kin staring up from the depths. I researched more, digging through library books on Appalachian folklore, pages yellowed with stories of haints and echoing hollers where the dead speak through streams. One account chilled me, a ranger's log from the 50s, detailing hikers gone missing near Hollow Creek, last seen following calls into the mist. Search parties found nothing but boot prints leading to the water, vanishing at the edge. Feral people, some speculated, descendants of Civil War deserters or Great Depression outcasts, living wild, mimicking voices to draw prey. Plausible, in these vast woods where folks could disappear and survive on roots and cunning. Or maybe just the land itself, absorbing sorrow like the tannins stained the creek, replaying it for those who listened too close. I avoided the area, but curiosity, or masochism, drew me back one crisp fall day, leaves crunching underfoot like the echoes that haunted me. The trail felt shorter, the quiet heavier, as if the forest anticipated my return. At the creek, water running black as ever, I stood on the bank, heart pounding, dipped to toe in, the warmth unnatural, ripples spreading. Voices rose immediate, not just mine but others, strangers please. Arguments and accents thick with mountain drawl, layered like sediment. Something brushed my leg again, insistent, and I fled. Webs from branches matching old scars. Home now feels less safe. Echoes infiltrating empty rooms, murmuring in the quiet between TV shows or during lulls in conversation. I thought of moving, but these mountains root you deep. Leaving feels like running, just like the voices accuse. The dread builds slow, a constant hum, making every silence suspicious, every water sound a potential call. That hollow holds more than legends. It cradles the unsaid, the regretted, releasing them to follow you. And in still moments, I wonder if those brushes were hands of the lost, feral or otherwise, pulling for company, or my own guilt manifesting, ensuring I never truly escape the echoes of what I've left unsaid. The sorrow lingers, unanswered, whispering that solitude isn't peace. It's just space for the past to catch up.
Story 6.
I'd moved to that rundown trailer on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina, back in the fall of 12, after the factory in town laid off half its crew, me included. The place was cheap, tucked away in a forgotten corner of the Blue Ridge foothills, where the pines crowded close, and the dirt road turned to mud after every rain. I'd grown up in these parts, in a holler not far off, where folks still told stories around the fire about old-timers gone missing in the woods, living feral after some family fallout or bad luck that drove them mad. Dad used to say the mountains don't forget grudges. They just bury them deep, waiting for the right moment to unearth. After losing the job, I figured the isolation would give me peace. Time to sort my head. Bills piling up. Ex-wife calling about child support I couldn't pay. The weight of it all pressing like the low clouds that hugged the ridges. The trailer was a single wide, walls thin as paper, with a leaky roof and a propane heater that hummed uneven through the nights. No neighbors for miles, just the occasional deer rustling in the brush or a coyote's yip echoing distant. Solitude suited me at first. I'd sit on the sagging porch with a beer, watching the sun dip behind the trees, the world fading to gray. Nights were long out there, the kind where sleep comes fitful, broken by dreams of conveyor belts jamming or empty bank statements. I'd wake sometimes to the creak of the trailer settling, or wind whistling through cracks, but nothing that set my nerves on edge like that one morning. It was early winter, frost etching the windows, the air inside crisp despite the heater. I'd turned in late the night before, mind turning over a letter from my boy, asking why I didn't visit more. Words that stung like salt in a cut. Sleep finally claimed me around midnight, heavy and dreamless, until something pulled me awake just before dawn. The clock on the nightstand glowed red. 3:47 a.m. I lay there, eyes adjusting to the dim, feeling a presence in the room, heavy and watchful, like eyes boring into me from the shadows. The usual night sounds were absent. No heater hum, no distant train rumbling through the valley, no crickets, if any lingered in the cold. Just a stifling quiet that thickened the air, making it hard to draw a breath. I sat up slow, sheets rustling loud in the silence, my heart starting a steady thump. The room looked the same, bed against the wall, dresser cluttered with bills, and a half-empty bottle of whiskey. The door to the living area cracked open, but the air tasted off, metallic like blood, coating my tongue as I swallowed. I rubbed my eyes, telling myself it was nothing, just the remnants of a bad dream or the isolation playing tricks. These rural spots do that. Folks talk about cabin fever, but in a trailer, it's tighter, more intimate, like the walls close in when you're alone too long. I swung my legs over the bed's edge, bare feet hitting the cold linoleum, and that's when I noticed the bedsheets depressed beside me, as if someone had just risen, the fabric still warm to the touch. My skin crawled. I hadn't shared that bed in years, not since the divorce. I stared at the indentation, mind racing animal? No, too large, too human-shaped. The floor was dusty, tracked with dirt from my boots, and as I leaned forward, footprints appeared in the grime, small and bare, like a child's, materializing one by one as if pressed fresh, leading from the bed to the window. They weren't there before. I'd mopped haphazard 2 days back, my breath caught, shallow and quick, as I followed them with my eyes. The prints delicate, toes played natural. Outside, through the thin curtain, pre-dawn gray revealed a silhouette against the glass, unmoving, humanoid but slight, head tilted as if listening. I froze, heart racing now, a cold sweat breaking on my back. The figure didn't shift, just stood there in the yard's gloom, details lost to the dark, but presence undeniable. These woods bred strange sightings, hunters spotting feral people, king gone wild after hard times, surviving on scraps and cunning, eyes hollow, from years without light. I'd laughed it off in town, but alone here, doubt crept in. The silhouette pressed a hand to the pane, palm flat, and a smudge bloomed where it touched, fogging slight with breath, warm against the frost. Whispering started then, incoherent at first, like wind through dry leaves, rustling from a window, or maybe inside my head. It grew clearer, forming pleas for help in a voice crackling and faint, like an old recording skipping. Please, cold, let me in. Not demanding, but desperate, edged with a sorrow that tugged at something deep. My mind flashed to local legends, stories of children lost in the forests decades back, during the floods of '40, their calls echoing through the hollers long after searches ended, or runaways, turned feral from abuse, haunting the edges of properties, seeking warmth they never found. I backed away slow, feet sliding on the floor, the whispers following, now circling the room like an unseen draft. The door handle turned on its own, creaking open inch by inch, the latch clicking soft. No one visible in the hallway beyond, just shadows stretching long from the living room's nightlight. Panic welled hot in my throat. I bolted for the bathroom, the only door with a lock, slamming it shut and twisting the knob. The tile was icy underfoot, the mirror fogging with my ragged breaths. I leaned against the sink, listening as steps paced outside, soft, bare feet on linoleum, deliberate and unhurried, circling the trailer like a sentinel. The whisper seeped through the door, clearer now. Daddy, why'd you leave? My boy's voice. No, couldn't be. He was safe with his mom and Raleigh. But the tone twisted familiar regrets, echoing arguments I'd had with myself in the quiet nights. Hours passed in that cramped space, me huddled on the edge of the tub, shotgun from under the sink in my lap, unloaded, but heavy reassurance. The pacing continued sporadic, pauses filled with scratches at the door, nails dragging light like testing. Dawn crept in eventual, sunlight streaming through the small frosted window, warming the air. The sounds faded with the light, silence returning gradual, broken only by a bird's call outside. I waited another hour, heart slowing, before cracking the door. The hallway empty, no footprints on the floor, the bedsheets smooth as if untouched. The window pane clean, no smudge, no fog. I checked the yard, dew-slick grass undisturbed, no tracks leading to the trailer. Just the pines swaying gentle in the morning breeze, the world ordinary again. But the dread lingered, a quiet knot in my gut that didn't untie with daylight. I threw myself into chores that day, fixing the roof leak, chopping wood for the stove, hoping sweat would purge the unease. Town folks shrugged when I mentioned it vague over coffee at the diner. Woods get to you sometimes, old Miss Harlan said, eyes knowing. Heard tell of visitors at dawn, remnants of folks who didn't make it through hard winters, feral and forgotten. She spoke of her uncle, vanished in the '70s after losing his farm, rumored to wander the ridges, peering in windows for a glimpse of warmth. Plausible in these isolated stretches where survival strips you bare. I'd seen meth heads turned wild in the backcountry, eyes desperate, movements ghost-like. Nights after, sleep evaded me. I'd lie awake, clock ticking toward that hour, ears straining for the quiet that preceded it. Sometimes nothing, just the heater's hum in my own breaths. Others, faint depressions in the couch where I doze, or whispers in the walls like pipes settling wrong. I rigged lights on timers, kept the shotgun loaded by the bed. But security felt fragile. The trailer's thin metal no match for whatever thinned the veil at dawn. Memory surfaced unbidden, Dad's abandonment, his note saying the mountains called him away, never seen again. Was he out there, feral now, seeking reconciliation, or my own guilt manifesting, the isolation birthing hallucinations from regrets? One morning, weeks later, it returned subtler, the air metallic, quiet descending like a blanket. No footprints, but the door ajar, a chill draft carrying whispers. Let me stay. I didn't hide. Sat up, calling out, voice steady but hollow. No answer, just a sense of eyes watching from corners. By light, gone again, leaving me to question sanity. I thought of leaving, packing for the city, but these hills root you. Escape feels like betrayal. The unease became companion, spiking at that pre-dawn hour when alone blurs with accompanied. Months blurred, spring thawing the ground, but the visitor persisted intermittent. A smudge on the mirror, steps in the dew outside that vanished with sun. I researched at the library, yellowed clippings of missing persons in the Smokies, families fractured by poverty, some turning to the woods rather than face shame. Feral communities, whispers suggested, surviving on edges, drawn to lights like moths, bleeding silent. One article chilled, a trailer fire in '89, child lost, body never found, parents claiming glimpses years later. I stayed, stubborn or scared, the trail of my anchor in a drifting life. But the dread simmers constant now, a sorrowful confusion. Is it a lost soul, feral and pitiable, or my mind unraveling in solitude? Some visitors don't need invitations. They come with the dark, slipping through cracks in your resolve, leaving only unease that thickens with each dawn. In quiet moments, I hear the pleas faint, wondering if answering would bring peace or pull me into the shadows. The mountains hold their secrets close, and mine grow heavier, echoing in the still hours when the veil thins, reminding that survival ain't always living. Sometimes it's just waiting for what's unseen to finally show its face.
Story 7.
Farming in southern Ohio had always been a solitary grind, the kind that wears you down slow like the erosion on these rolling hills where the Appalachians bleed into the flatlands. I'd inherited the land from Uncle Harlan back in Ohio, after he passed quiet in his sleep, leaving behind a farmhouse sagging under its own weight and 200 acres of corn that stretched like a golden sea come harvest. The place was tucked away near Chillicothe, miles from the nearest town, where the roads turned to gravel and the nights swallowed sound. I'd left the city life behind, Columbus, with its noise and dead-end jobs, thinking the farm would steady me after the mess with my folks. Dad drank himself into an early grave. Mom followed from a broken heart or cancer, depending on who you asked. Uncle Harlan's warnings echoed in my head those first years. Things in a rose, boy. Not coyotes, not deer. Keep your eyes open after dark. I dismissed it as old-timer talk, the ramblings of a man who'd spent too many seasons alone, listening to the wind play tricks. But farming meant long nights checking the fields, especially during harvest when coyotes prowled bold, nipping at the edges for easy pickings. I grabbed the shotgun, more for peace of mind than necessity, and patrolled the perimeter, the air thick with the sweet rot of turning leaves. That moonless evening in late October, the sky was a void, stars hidden behind a blanket of clouds that promised rain but held off teasing. The harvest was nearly done, stalks stripped to stubble and patches, but the backfield still stood tall, rows towering over my head like silent guardians. I'd finished supper early, canned beans and cornbread, eaten alone at the kitchen table under the buzz of a fluorescent light, and felt that familiar pull to check the land. Coyotes had been at it the night before, gathering husks and leaving prints that looked too deliberate, too spaced for pack animals. I shrugged on my flannel jacket, the one with holes at the elbows from barbed wire fences, and loaded the 12-gauge with buckshot. The farmhouse door creaked as I stepped out, the porch light casting a feeble yellow pool that died at the yard's edge. Beyond, the cornfield loomed dark, rustling soft in a breeze, like whispers shared among old friends. I flicked on the flashlight, its beam cutting a narrow path through the gloom, and ventured in, boots sinking into the soft earth between the rows. The stalks closed around me immediate, creating a maze where every turn felt watched, the leaves brushing my arms like curious fingers. I'd walked these fields 100 times, knew the layout like the veins on my hands, but at night, familiarity twisted into something else, isolation that pressed in, making your thoughts louder, your breaths heavier. The air smelled of damp soil and decaying vegetation, a set that grounded you, but also reminded how quickly things rot out here. Uncle Harlan's words nagged at me as I pushed deeper, shotgun slung over my shoulder, flashlight sweeping side to side. He'd inherited from his pa, who got it from his, a line of men tied to this dirt, each passing with stories of strange happenings. Lights in the fields, sounds that mimicked voices, figures glimpsed stooped among the corn. Feral once, he called them, kin or strangers driven wild by hard times. The Depression wars, feuds that split families and sent some scurrying into the woods to survive on what they could scavenge. I'd nod polite, but inside, I figured it was loneliness talking, the mind filling voids with shadows. A rustle started then, off to my left, not the random sway of wind, but purposeful, like something moving parallel through the rows. My light swung toward it, illuminating nothing but swaying stalks, but the sound persisted, dry leaves crackling underweight. Coyotes, I told myself, though it didn't fit. They slink quiet, not this deliberate shuffle. I called out, "Get on now." Voice firm but echoing back distorted through the corn, mocking in its rebound. The rustling paused, then resumed, circling now, close enough to feel the displaced air brushing my neck, raising hairs. My heart picked up, a steady thump against my ribs, but I pressed on. Shotgun off my shoulder now, gripped tight. The field felt alive, every rustle a breath, every shadow a potential eye. Memories surfaced unbidden. Uncle Harlan's last days, bedridden, whispering about things that watched from the rows, pleading for me to burn the field come fall. I chalked it to delirium, the pain meds clouding his mind, but now, alone in the dark, doubt crept in like fog in the valleys. The circling intensified, sounds weaving around me, now behind, now to the side, hurting almost. I stopped, breath fogging in the chill, and parted the corn with the shotgun barrel, light piercing through. Their form, humanoid but stooped low, skin pale in the beam, vanishing quick behind the stalks before I could aim. My mouth went dry. Not an animal, too upright, too evasive. "Who's there?" I shouted, voice cracking slight, but the echo returned warped, laughing low like it knew a joke I didn't. Pursuit wasn't smart. These fields could disorient even in daylight, but curiosity, or maybe that stubborn streak Uncle Harlan said ran in the family, pulled me forward. I followed the trampled path it left, stalks bent and broken, leading deeper into the maze. The rustling kept pace, flanking me, air thick with tension, every step crunching loud in the quiet. Sweat trickled down my back despite the cold, mind racing vagrant. Some poor soul squatting in the field, turned feral from hunger or madness. Stories abounded in these parts, folks vanishing after foreclosures, living rough in abandoned barns or crop rows, eyes wild from isolation. The path opened suddenly into a small clearing I'd forgotten or never known, a patch where corn hadn't taken, ringed by taller stalks like a hidden room. In the center stood an old scarecrow, one Uncle Harlan must have set years back, its burlap face stitched in a grimace, button eyes staring blank, straw spilled from rents in its shirt, hat tattered by weather. The rustling intensified around the edges, closing in, and as I approached cautious, shotgun raised, the scarecrow's arms twitched, subtle at first, like wind tugging, but no breeze stirred. Straw shifted, spilling like blood from wounds, and a low rasp escaped. Or maybe it was the leaves. My light trembled, casting jittery shadows that made the figure seem alive. Limbs jerking unnatural. Panic gloomed hot on my chest. Was something inside it? Hiding, using the effigy as cover? I fired a warning shot skyward. The boom swallowed immediate into silence. No echo, no bird startling, just a field absorbing the sound like a secret. I fled then, turning back the way I'd come. Thorns from the stalks cutting my hands as I pushed through. Warm blood slicking my grip on the gun. Behind me, steps matched mine, heavy, deliberate, crunching earth in pursuit. Branches whipped my face, leaving stings that burned, but I didn't look back. Heart pounding like it had burst. The farmhouse light guided me, a beacon through the rows, and I burst from the field, across the yard, slamming the door behind me. Bolt thrown with shaking hands. Leaning against it, gasping, I listened. The rustling persisted outside, circling the house slow, leaves and stalks whispering against the siding until dawn crept gray over the horizon. Morning brought normalcy, the field looking peaceful under the sun, rose golden and still. No trampled paths when I checked, shotgun in hand. No clearing, just endless corn. The scarecrow stood where it always had, at the field's edge, arms limp, face faded but not grimacing. No blood on my hands, just scratches from husks. I told myself it was imagination, the dark and solitude conjuring fears from Uncle Harlan's tales. But as days passed, harvest wrapping up, the quiet fear settled in. Nights brought rustles faint through the windows, even with fields stubbled bare. I'd wake to sounds in the walls, like something nesting, waiting. Winter came harsh, snow blanketing the land, but the unease didn't hibernate. I'd sift through Uncle Harlan's things in the attic, finding journals yellowed with age, entries about watchers in a rose, kin he'd wronged in youth, a brother run off after a feud, rumor to live feral in the fields, surviving on corn and grudge. They come back, he wrote, hands shaky, twisted by time, hiding in plain sight. I burned the pages, flames devouring the words, but it didn't erase the doubt. Was it him out there, stooped and vengeful, or my mind unraveling like his? Spring planting loomed, but I delayed. The field followed longer than usual. One evening, as dusk fell, rustle started again, soft, from the empty dirt. I stayed inside, door locked, but through the window, a stooped shadow shifted at the edge, vanishing when I blinked. No pursuit, just watching. The fierce quiet now, a constant hum, making every rustle suspicious, every shadow a hideout. These fields hide more than crops. They cradle the forgotten, the feral remnants of life soured, waiting to emerge when the light fails. And in the still hours, I wonder if burning it all would free me, or just stir what's buried deeper. The sorrow clings, confusing, regret for dismissing the warnings, or pity for whatever lingers out there, alone as me. Nights stretch longer, the rustling a reminder that some things in the rows don't harvest easy. They root and wait, hidden in plain sight. The seasons turned relentless after that. Summer heat baking the earth, corn sprouting despite my hesitation, rows filling and like nothing happened. I'd worked the land by day, tractor rumbling over the soil, but my eyes darted to the edges, expecting movement. Town folk noticed my gaunt look at the feed store, asked if the farm was treating me right. "Coyotes bad this year?" Old man Jenkins queried, leaning on his cane. I nodded vague, not mentioning the nights when rustles woke me. Circling the trailer I'd moved to after the house, felt too exposed. "Heard your uncle had stories," he added, eyes sharp. "Things in the fields, eh?" My pa said the same. Folks gone wild after the '29 crash, living like animals, stealing ears of corn to survive. Some never came back civilized. His words stuck, festering like weeds. One harvest eve, similar moonless sky, I ventured out again. Couldn't avoid it, coyotes or no. Shotgun heavy in my hands, flashlight beam steady, but my steps faltering. The rows welcomed me, stalks whispering as I entered, rustles starting subtle, building. Circling again, displaced air brushing close. A stooped form glimpsed fleeting. I pursued, heart in throat, finding the clearing once more, or imagining it. The scarecrow twitching, straw spilling. No shot this time. I backed away slow, steps matching behind as I fled. Cuts on my skin, fresh reminders. Home, door barred. The rustling persisted till dawn, fading with light. No evidence come morning, but the dread deepened, emotional now, gripping like vines around my chest. Uncle Harlan's brother? A feral echo of family sins, or my own isolation birthing phantoms from guilt. I'd wronged folks too. Dad's drinking, mom's pleas ignored, the farm a refuge turned prison. The fields look normal by day, golden waves under sun, but nights bring the quiet fear, rustles in the wind or mind, hidden threats waiting to emerge. Confusion swirls with sorrow, a lingering ache. Am I the watcher now, or the watched? The corn grows tall again, maize reforming, and I listen, knowing some harvests reap more than grain. They unearth what's sown in the dark. leaving you to wonder if emergence means revelation or ruin.
Story 8.
The house had stood on that patch of Pennsylvania hillside since the 1800s, a relic from when coal barons carved their fortunes out of these Appalachian ridges, leaving behind towns that clung to life like burrs on a boot. I'd bought it cheap 5 years back, after my construction job dried up in Pittsburgh, figuring the quiet of Potter County would suit me better than the city's grind. The place was solid enough, stone foundation, timber frame weathered but sturdy, with a wraparound porch that groaned in the wind like an old man telling stories. But the basement was another matter. Low ceiling, dirt floored in spots, shelves sagging under dusty jars and forgotten tools from generations past. Creaks were common down there, the house settling on its bones, and I'd grown used to them, just like the isolation that came with living miles from the nearest neighbor, where the forest pressed close and the roads turned to ruts after rain. Folks in town whispered about these old homes, how they held onto echoes of the past, miners lost in collapses, families fractured by hard times, some turning feral in the woods to escape debts or despair. I'd laugh it off over coffee at the diner, but alone at night, those tales lingered like fog in the valleys. That stormy midnight in early fall, the power cut out with a pop, plunging everything into black as thunder rolled over the hills like distant artillery. I'd been dozing in the living room chair, a book on local history open on my lap. Tales of underground rivers flooding basements, trapping folks in the dark. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters, rain lashing the windows and sheets. I fumbled for my flashlight on the side table, its beam cutting through the gloom, illuminating the faded wallpaper and the door to the basement stairs. The fuse box was down there, tucked in a corner behind stacks of crates from the previous owners. Relics I hadn't bothered to sort. No choice but to check. The heater would quit without power, and nights up here dipped cold quick. I pulled on my slippers, the floorboards cool underfoot, and cracked the basement door, a musty draft rising like breath from a grave. Descending those stairs was always a chore, the steps narrow and steep, wood worn smooth by countless feet, handrail loose in its brackets. But that night, the temperature dropped unnatural with each step. Not the usual chill, but something sharper, piercing like needles on my skin. Gooseflesh rose on my arms, and I paused halfway down, flashlight beam jittering on the rough stone walls. The house creaked around me, familiar pops and groans amplified by the storm, but underneath, a rhythmic breathing joined them, soft inhalations and exhalations, sinking eerie with my own. I held my breath, listening. It continued undeterred, faint but steady, like someone, or something, matching me from the shadows. My heart gave a thud, but I shook it off as wind whistling through vents or the old furnace settling. These old places played tricks. Uncle Pete, who'd helped me move in, joked about breathers in the basements, remnants of squatters or lost kin from the Depression era, living feral below ground to hide from the world. Tall tales, I'd thought, but now, alone in the dim, doubt nibbled at the edges. I reached the bottom, beam revealing dusty shelves lined with canning jars, glinting like eyes, forgotten boxes stacked haphazard in the corners. The air was thicker here, heavy with the scent of earth and mildew. The storm's rumble muffled overhead. The breathing grew louder, no longer sinking but independent, coming from behind a pile of crates near the fuse box, deep, labored, like an old man wheezing after a climb. I swept the light over, shadows leaping, but saw nothing out of place. "Hello," I called soft, voice echoing off the walls, swallowed quick. No answer, just the breathing persisting, closer now, raising the hairs on my neck. Rational mind said rat or possum, nested in the crates, but the rhythm was too human, too deliberate. I stepped forward, boots scuffing the dirt floor, and set the flashlight down to move the top crate aside, with splintery under my hands, dust motes dancing in the beam. Behind it, only cobwebs draping like veils, no animal, no source. But a cold gust swept through, unnatural in the still basement, extinguishing the flashlight with a puff, plunging me into pitch black. Darkness absolute, the kind that presses on your eyes, disorient. I fumbled for the light, hard hammering, but my fingers found only cold metal. The bulb dead or batteries failed at the worst moment. The breathing swelled, enveloping now, hot and moist against my ear, though no one could be that close. Panic flickered, but I stretched hands out, feeling along the walls, rough stone scraping my palms, guiding me back toward the stairs. Fingers brushed mine then, clammy and insistent, gripping brief like a handshake from the grave before releasing. Not wind, not imagination, skin on skin, nails ragged, a touch that sent ice down my spine. I yelped, pulling back, stumbling over a box, the crash echoing loud. The breathing followed as I scrambled up the stairs, hot on my neck, puffs sinking with my ragged gasps, steps creaking behind like pursuit. I reached the top, bursting through the door, slamming it shut behind me. But it caught, then closed with a force not my own, the lock clicking from inside, as if turned by unseen hands. I leaned against it, chest heaving, listening. Faint scratches from below, nails on wood, then silence broken only by the storm outside. The power flickered back on moments later, lights buzzing to life. But I didn't dare reopen that door. Instead, I barricaded it with a chair, spent the night in the chair upstairs, shotgun across my lap from the closet, ears straining for any sound from below. Days blurred into routine, fixing fences, chopping wood for winter, the house creaking familiar again. Town folks shrugged when I mentioned it vague at the hardware store. Old houses got stories, the clerk said, eyes distant. My gramps talked of breathers down below, folks hid in basements during raids or floods. Some never came up, turned feral in the dark, surviving on roots seeping through. He chuckled, but his tone held weight, like he'd heard it too many nights. I researched at the library, yellow deeds showing the house built over an old mine shaft, sealed but maybe not airtight. Echoes carrying from underground where lost miners or vagrants wandered. Plausible in these riddled hills where tunnels honeycombed the earth, swallowing men whole. Nights grew uneasy. I'd avoid the basement, running extension cords for power checks. But sometimes, in the quiet hours, breathing faint through the floorboards, syncing with mine as I lay awake, memories surfaced. Dad's tales of his great uncle, vanished in the 20s after a family spat, rumored to burrow under homes, feral and forgotten. Seeking warmth, he denied others. Had he found refuge below? Or was it guilt manifesting? My own isolation birthing phantoms from regrets? I'd neglected kin too. Sisters' calls ignored, friends drifted in the move. The touch lingered in dreams, clammy fingers gripping, pulling me down. One stormy eve months later, power out again. I had no choice. Fuse tripped. House dark. Flashlight in hand. I cracked the door, temperature dropping sharp, breathing starting low on the stairs. I descended slow, each step a question, beam shaking. At the bottom, the sound behind the crates, gust extinguishing the light, fingers brushing mine insistent. I fled up, breathing hot on my neck, door slamming, locking inside. Morning, no traces, just descending prints. The basement stays sealed now, door nailed shut, power rerouted. But the dread fosters, a quiet companion making every creak suspicious, every breath my own or another's. Some echoes belong to the past, feral remnants or buried guilts, rising in the dark, questioning if descent means return or joining what's below. Confusion swirls with sorrow, lingering in still moments. Am I alone or accompanied by what the house holds? The hills keep their secrets, and mine deepen, breath sinking in the night, waiting for the next storm to call me down. Weeks turn to months, winter blanketing the land in snow, insulating the house, but not the unease. I'd huddle by the wood stove upstairs. Flame was crackling, but the cold from below seeped through. Reminder, town library yielded more, clippings of caverns nearby, bodies never recovered. Families claiming breaths heard in cellars years later. One account chilled, a widow in the 50s, basement flooded, son drowned. Her whispers of his breathing at night, till she sealed it, moved away. Feral survival, or minds cracked by loss? I pondered my own cracks. Job loss isolating me, family ties frayed. The touch replayed in idle moments, clammy grip like accusation. Spring thawed the ground, but not the fear. Rainstorms triggered it, power flickering, urging descent. I'd resist, using lanterns upstairs, but whispers filtered through vents. Please faint. Help cold. Not aggressive, but sorrowful, tugging at heartstrings. I rigged a camera once, motion activated, but footage showed nothing. Just static bursts with a breathing pealt, my figure descending alone. No return ascent visible. Erased it, but doubt festered. Hallucination, or something evading light. One midnight, storm raging. I cracked the seal. Nails pried, door creaking open. Temperature plummeted, breathing immediate, drawing me down. At the bottom, crates shifted slide on their own, gust killing the light. Fingers gripping longer this time, pulling gentle. I wrenched free, stumbling up, hot breath pursuing, door slamming. Locked inside again till dawn. No evidence come light, but what's on my arm from the grip, fading slow like bruises from a dream. I reseal tighter, but sounds persist, breaths under floors, sinking in sleep. The house feels alive now, basement a heart pulsing below, echoing past sins or losses. Sorrow grips emotional, pity for whatever lingers, confusion if it's real or my unraveling solitude. These Appalachian basements hold more than dust. They cradle unburied echoes, feral or familial, fostering dread that turns every descent, real or remembered, into a question of return. Nights stretch, breaths waiting, leaving me to wonder if ceiling keeps it in, or me out with it. The fear doesn't end. It breathes quiet and insistent in the dark spaces between storms.